Hello, good afternoon, welcome back to Premier League Dad. It's game week 21 in the Premier League and we've got a massive set of midweek fixtures coming up. Let's take a look. So first up, Manchester City travelling to Brentford. That's a 7:30pm kickoff on Tuesday night. Brentford have just struggled in the last sort of 6 weeks or so. One win in 7, of course, and that was away at Southampton, who are bottom of the league. They went out to Plymouth in the FA Cup at home this weekend, of course. Thomas Frank is a fantastic manager. Just wonder what's going on with Brentford at the moment, because I've seen them play, some games in that run of 7. I've seen them play where they've been all right. I actually thought they were okay against Arsenal recently. Took the lead, of course, went 1-0 up in that one. And then it was just silly. I think it was Brian and Bournemouth just dallying with the ball at the edge of the area, overplaying. Arsenal nick it and they score, and it's moments like that where if Brentford can just see it out to half time, they probably grind out at least a point, maybe even a win, and then it all feels slightly different. But it is just starting to get on top of them a little bit. They're not in danger of relegation, they're nowhere near that at all, but they definitely need a result of some sort here, or at least a big performance, you'd have to say. And you've got to say as well, Brentford are a team that typically relish playing the big sides, don't they? As a Liverpool fan, I hate going to two places in particular. I hate going to Palace and I hate going to Brentford. Even a Liverpool side that's playing really, really well, Brentford can get a result against. And they absolutely have the ability to cause Manchester City problems this weekend. However, I am going to go for a City win. And the reason I'm going to go for a City win is just because we've seen Man City in the last couple of games against Leicester, where I didn't think they were terrific, but they got the result. It was one of them where Leicester could quite easily have got a draw. They then play West Ham. Again, West Ham have some big chances in the first half. If one of those goes in, maybe it's a slightly different game. But West Ham caused them problems, and it actually took an own goal to break the deadlock. But Savinho's just gone up a gear, hasn't he? He won my Player of the Week last game week, funnily enough. He's just gone up a gear. Looks like he's really starting to settle there at City, and he's got bags of pace. He can drop a shoulder and get in behind. Just starting to produce a little bit more with his final ball, which was a problem for him earlier in the season. Got the opening goal against Leicester City. Basically got the opening goal against West Ham, albeit it was a deflection. He created a couple more for Haaland as well. So this is what City do, isn't it? Let's be honest. This is what City do. They don't always play really well. They don't always play how we know they can. They can pass teams off the park sometimes, but I don't think we're going to see vintage Manchester City probably at any point this season. But Pep Guardiola's just got to get them to grind out those wins, and we've seen that. We've seen the Manchester City machine, and I just think it's starting to kick into gear now. So I don't think the performance will be vintage at all. I actually think Brentford can and will probably score, maybe cause Manchester City some problems. But I think City get it over the line in the end. They've just got too much quality in that final third, and I think they'll get it over the line in the end. So I'm going to go 2-1. I'm going to go 2-1 Manchester City. So next up, another 7:30pm kickoff on Tuesday night is Graham Potter's first game as West Ham manager. He's at home to Fulham. That's another one that's quite difficult to call, isn't it? I saw West Ham, I watched West Ham against Aston Villa in the FA Cup, and for large parts of that game, although Villa weren't terrific, I thought West Ham defended incredibly well, and I think that's a really important thing that Graham Potter seems to have landed on. It must have been the first priority, because West Ham have conceded more than Ipswich in the league this season. They are, I think, the third or fourth worst defence in the league. So his top priority coming in has just probably been to get them into some sort of shape. Let's just get some sort of organisation at the back here. And against Aston Villa, for large parts of the game, Aston Villa didn't trouble West Ham at all. I thought they defended very, very well as a team. They pressed a lot better. And again, it took a bit of a scrappy, lucky, fluky, bobbly goal to actually concede in the end. And West Ham were unlucky against Aston Villa, I thought. This is going to be a game where he prioritises defence and clean sheets and keeping it tight at the back, especially because West Ham haven't got a huge amount to offer in terms of attack. They've got no Jared Bowen, they've got no Michail Antonio, no Nicholas Füllkrug either. They're really short in attack. They're going to have to probably play Paqueta, Kudus, Ings maybe in attack, and it's going to have to be a slightly odd shape to it. I think for that reason, if Fulham do score, especially if they score first, I think Fulham possibly go on to win it. It's going to be a very close game, a very, very close game, one that I would predict might have few goals. So I'm tempted to go. I'm going to go 1-1. Just because I think West Ham will struggle to keep Fulham out, because Jimenez and Muniz have been really clinical for Fulham recently. But Potter will have them well drilled. The crowd will be up for it being, the first game at home for the new manager. And I think it'll be a point. I think it'll be a 1-1. So I'm going to go 1-1 that one. Next up, this is the final 7:30pm kickoff on Tuesday. Chelsea and Bournemouth at Stamford Bridge. Wow. This one really is tight to call. Chelsea, again, just can't quite get the job done. They threw it away against Crystal Palace, didn't they? Threw it away in the end. And Bournemouth, again, getting the job done against Everton. They're grinding out results now. They're not just able to blow teams away, which we've seen them do this season. They're able to beat that Sean Dyche low block as well and grind out results. It's a really, really big performance, that, I think, for Andoni Iraola. And they'll have such confidence going to Stamford Bridge. It'll be a really, really big test for both sides, let's be honest, because Bournemouth are right on the heels of Chelsea in the league. They really are. They're right on the heels in those European places. And if they get a result here, even a point, I think if Bournemouth can go to Stamford Bridge and limit Chelsea and get anything, a point, then the fans might just start to believe, actually, we could be doing some European away days next season. And what a season that would be, by the way. I really think if Iraola gets Bournemouth into the Europa Conference League or the Europa League, he would be up there for me in terms of manager of the year. I think it would be phenomenal, especially when you consider the budget, the size of the club, the stadium, the income that they get. I don't think they've spent that much. They've got this wonderful policy, very much like Brighton, in terms of signing young players, giving them a platform, giving them a chance to make mistakes and affording them that ability to do so. I think the young centre-back Hyson, who's come in, has been terrific. Zabanyi's looked really, really good. Obviously, Kirkez, who's linked with Liverpool. I think Ouattara's looked a different type of player. Even Kluivert, who I didn't think there was that player in Kluivert, has been really, really good. I mean, let's be clear, I have no horse in the race, but we all love an underdog story, don't we? So I am almost rooting for Bournemouth at Stamford Bridge, and I'm fascinated to see how they get on. I mean, for Chelsea, they blew Morecambe away in the FA Cup at the weekend, as everyone, expected them to. But they are 4 games now without a win in the Premier League. And that run can't carry on for much longer if they've got genuine ambitions of being in the Champions League. I think the title race, that's long gone now. They went to Goodison Park, they drew 0-0. They then got beat at home off Fulham. And that was a really tough one to take so late on. Then they go to Ipswich and lose at Portman Road. And then last week, again, they were 1-0 up early doors against Crystal Palace and threw it away, I have to say. So it's a really tough one for Chelsea. I can't sit here and say Chelsea are going to breeze past Bournemouth, because they're just not in that form. They're not in that place. As good as Cole Palmer's been, I think Sancho started to look a little bit better recently, but they still look a little bit disjointed at the back, and they still look really susceptible to transition in midfield. As good as Fernandes, Caicedo, Lavia have been, they still look really vulnerable when they lose the ball in that sort of the opposition third. The counter-attack, they've been hit so many times in the last few games on that. Everton probably should have won at Goodison Park in that exact sort of scenario. Lost the ball, pressing high up, lost the ball, other end, and I think it was Jack Harrison missed an absolute sitter. So Chelsea are definitely causing themselves problems. And this is exactly the sort of banana skin game that they could probably do without right now. I'm probably going to sit on the fence. I can't pick a winner in this one. I think Bournemouth definitely score. I'd be astonished if Bournemouth don't get at least one. And equally, I'd probably be surprised if Cole Palmer doesn't have an effect. He's still a world-class player. I'm sure Cole Palmer will create or score one himself. So I'm going to go 2-2. I'm going to go Desmond. I'm going to go the old favourite, 2-2. Chelsea 2, Bournemouth 2. Be a really interesting one, that one. Let's see. Next up, the big 8 o'clock game on Tuesday night is Nottingham Forest against Liverpool. This one's really tough for me to call personally, because I honestly have no idea what to make of it. It depends very much on what Liverpool shows up. I think a big factor at play here is that Nottingham Forest, we talked about it in the last video, Forest have the lowest possession stats in the entire league. They are quite happy to afford the opposition the ball, give you the ball, because they are so good. They have been lethal in transition, so they're so strong on the counter-attack that they don't mind the opposition having the ball, and they've set themselves up to be this fantastic counter-attacking side. You know, they're playing those long balls up to Chris Wood, who's knocking them off, and they've got three really willing runners from midfield in Hudson-Odoi, Elanga and Gibbs-White, and it's working terrifically well for Nuno Santo. And that's basically what won them the game at Anfield. I remember watching that vividly. I remember watching the Liverpool game against Forest at Anfield, and Liverpool could have played for another... We could have been playing now, and we wouldn't have scored in that game. We were dreadful. We were absolutely dreadful. But I have to give Forest praise on that day as well, because they were terrific, defended really well, and didn't really give us a sniff. The City ground, funnily enough, is historically a really tough place for Liverpool to go. I think we won there last season, the Darwin Núñez sort of last-minute winner. But that's the only time Liverpool have won in their last 14 trips to Nottingham Forest. It's always been a really tough place for us to go, almost a bogey side, Nottingham Forest. And as much as I've got faith in my team, you know, Liverpool have won 7, drawn 2 on the road this season. We've got a very strong away record. You know, my heart probably tells me Liverpool, we'll get this one done. We'll beat them. We will beat them. But I'm so hesitant after that Man United game. After that Man United game where I called us to win 4-0 and the team just did not turn up. We were so leggy in midfield against Man United. We were so lethargic. There was just no intensity at all coming from midfield. And although the defence was pushing really high up, it was causing us so many problems in transition, because United hit a couple of balls over the top and they were in. And that is exactly the scenario that Nottingham Forest will be hoping for in this game. If Nottingham Forest could choose a team to play at the minute, it probably would be Liverpool, just because of how much we push up. We're very aggressive in pushing such a high line, because we have Kanate, we have Van Dijk, who are so fast in getting back. You know, when we're playing with that high line, it really only takes one of our fullbacks to switch off, and they've both had a habit of doing so this season, and let their man run, and they're in behind, and I think if Forest are likely to score, it'll be that sort of a goal. And the City ground will be bouncing. They will be up for this one, you better believe it. I'm going to have to fence it again. I can't call a winner in this one. I think Forest will start quick, and I actually think they'll take the lead. I think Forest take the lead in probably the way that I've just talked about. They will hit the ball over the top. Liverpool will be pushing too high, trying to break them down. And one of Hudson-Odoi, Elanga, or someone will get in behind, pull it back, and Wood might score. It'll be something like that. And I suspect then Liverpool will it'll be an onslaught then for maybe 60, 70 minutes, where Liverpool Forest sit deep, Liverpool chase, and it's then whether Liverpool can break them down and get the equaliser. And I suspect we probably just might. As much as we love the underdog story, I'm sure there's a lot of people that will be willing Forest to get a win, because then they're actually only 3 points off the top, and they'll be on a 7-game winning run, 3 points off the top of the league. Then people might actually start talking about Forest seriously and taking them seriously. I don't think they'll be title contenders, but there has to come a point in the season where Forest are so far ahead of Newcastle, Manchester City, they actually, you have to start taking them seriously for the Champions League places. Every time I speak to someone recently and ask them, who do you think is going to make the top 4? I've not had one person tell me Nottingham Forest is going to be in there. Not one. You know, maybe if they get 1 or 2 bodies in this month, that might change things. But yeah, too tough to call. I'm gonna go 1-1. I'm gonna go 1-1 because I think it could go either way, but I sense that both managers secretly, privately, would probably be happy with a point at the end of the day. So that may be how it goes. At the end, what will happen is if it is 1-1 going into the last 20 minutes, I can't see either manager taking significant risks just to try and get the 3 points. Personally, I think both will be quite content with a good away point for Liverpool and a good point that Forest have taken 4 points off Liverpool this season. I think both would be privately quite content with that. So I suspect that's what we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Next up, Everton. David Moyes' homecoming against Aston Villa at Goodison Park. And Goodness me, this is a tough one to call again. I feel like I'm saying this on every single game, but it's such a huge fixture list. Everyone is really, really tight. Villa, when they play in the Champions League, they look this phenomenal side. It's like they get really up for the big occasion. They play really, really well in Europe, and then they come back to the Premier League, and they look so inconsistent. They've put in big performances, of course, in recent weeks. They obviously beat Manchester City at Villa Park. Either side of that, they lost at the City Ground at Nottingham Forest. They lost away at St James's Park quite comfortably. It wasn't long ago before that they made hard work of beating Southampton at Villa Park as well. They obviously dropped points at home to Brighton. It just all seems a little bit inconsistent. It's not the Villa side that we saw last season. I just wonder if maybe they're getting that European hangover that a lot of teams get, by the way. It's not just Aston Villa. And again, this is a really, really tough trip. Goodison Park, under the lights. But I was watching the debate on Sky Sports News after David Moyes' return to Everton had been announced, and I was really fascinated by what Paul Merson had to say. Admittedly, Paul Merson, not my favourite pundit, doesn't always come out with absolute jewels. However, I thought he made a good point. I watched Everton in the Cup against Peterborough, and again, for large parts of that game, you really couldn't tell who the Premier League side was, and that wasn't a compliment to Peterborough. Everton were really, really poor. It's a really poor group of players that David Moyes has got to work with at Everton, and I felt sympathy for Sean Dyche because I kind of felt like he was making lemonade out of lemons. I thought he was just working with what he had and getting them into... It was horrible to watch, but getting them into some sort of shape, some sort of a rigid defensive shape that at least gets them points and grinds out the occasional win. They were never ever going to be free-flowing, attractive, fast-moving football. They don't have the players for it. They do not have the players for it, and I have to say that's probably why the Friedkin group have come in and hired another pragmatist, another manager like Sean Dyche, basically, another manager that will come in, experienced Premier League manager, and will just set the players up in a shape that affords them the ability to pick up some points. I just look at the group that Moyes has to work with. I mean, forget the fact that he's walking into a dressing room where, 9 or 10 players are basically out of contract in the summer and aren't wedded to the club. That's half the squad who psychologically know that they don't have to be there in a few months' time. That's incredibly difficult to manage for any manager. How do you get the best out of players who know that they're not going to be there very long? It's kind of like when you've handed your notice period in at work. He's got no natural width in the team. He's got very slow and old fullbacks and wingers who don't score and like to cut in. He's got a midfield of, effectively holding midfielders who are willing runners but very poor on the ball, quality-wise. And above all else, he's got no centre forward. So where's your goals coming from? So I have to say, I could be wrong, and I hope I am wrong. My granddad supported Everton. I hope I am wrong. But I expect we'll see more of the same under Moyes that we saw under Dyche. And for that reason, I'm going for an Aston Villa win. I watched Aston Villa in the Cup at the weekend against West Ham, and first half they were awful, really, really poor. Second half they came out and it looked like Emery had just shifted it round a little bit because they started to probe and threaten a little bit more, and the back line pushed up a little bit higher, and that's when they were able to start hurting West Ham a little bit more, and eventually they got the goal. It was a little bit scrappy, but they got it in the end, and once that went to 1-1, there was only ever going to be one winner. Villa got the tails up, and it was a great goal from Morgan Rogers, who has been one of the standout performers this season. Coming to Goodison, I just expect the atmosphere to be a little bit unusual. I think it might be a little bit flat. This isn't going to be a raucous, bouncing Goodison crowd, because this is a manager who the fans are very much divided on. There's not a lot of unity within the Everton fan base at the minute. It seems like, anyway, I could be wrong, but it feels like not a lot of them are certain on David Moyes. Not a lot of them wanted him back. There was a big call for a younger, maybe more progressive manager to come in, for the club to take a chance, the new owners to take a chance, and back a younger manager with a more progressive attacking playing style going into the new stadium. So there is that little bit of a feeling about Everton at the moment, and the fans probably will sense that and take that into the ground, whether they mean to or not, against Aston Villa. There'll be moments, of course, because Goodison Park's like that. It's a tough place to go. I don't expect a fast start. I think it'll probably be 0-0 for a large part of the game, and then maybe Aston Villa nick one, and then maybe nick a second one on the counter. So I'm going to go Everton 0, Aston Villa 2. So next up, Ruud van Nistelrooy's Leicester at home to Crystal Palace. Big game for Leicester, really big game. Something they have to take 3 points in. I think if they're going to stay in the Premier League, this is the sort of game they need to be winning. Again, I've said it a few times in previous videos, there's not many easy games in the Premier League, not any easy games in the Premier League, but there's some that you have to say, we have to get 3 points there, and this is one of them. If you want to be a Premier League side next season, from a Leicester City point of view, this has to be a win. Make no bones about it, it has to be a win. A draw's not really good enough. A defeat would be catastrophic. They need to start picking up wins, and picking up wins at home is the start. I don't really feel like they've improved under Ruud van Nistelrooy. I'll be honest, I don't think they've got any better since he's took over. He got the win at home against West Ham in his was it his first game, and you kind of felt like maybe they'll turn a corner. But since then they've picked up 1 point from a possible 21. Obviously a big morale boosting win against QPR in the Cup at the weekend, 6-2 I think it was. So, maybe they will get a little bit more confident coming into this one. But Leicester, starting with this game, have got a few quite winnable games coming up, you'd have to say. I think they play Fulham at home, and then they go away to Goodison Park not long after that. So within a short space of time, they've got 2 or 3 games there, which you would say, right, we have to pick up 3 points in them and really start to move up the table. For Palace, I can't see them losing this one, though. I really can't. I mean, they are 1 defeat in 9 games, I think it is, under Oliver Glasner. Not always the easiest on the eye, because they do afford the opposition quite a bit of possession, and that may have something to do with the fact that they're missing bodies in midfield. Obviously, Adam Wharton's been a big miss for them this season. It does feel like Palace have a lot to offer on the counter-attack with, Eze and Sarr and Mateta doing really well in that front 3. Obviously, they got the draw at home to Chelsea last week, but on the road, they've actually been really good as well. Obviously, they won at Portman Road, they won at the rivals, at the Amex, at Brighton, and they picked up a difficult point away at Bournemouth as well. So on the road, they are really quite strong as well, and you'd have to fancy them here at Leicester. I've got to say, I actually think Palace might win this one. I just haven't seen enough from Leicester that they are going to be a Premier League side next season, and unless they really strengthen in January, and it doesn't look like they've shown any signs of doing that just yet, I've got to say I think Palace are going to nick this one. I think we'll see goals, because for what it's worth, 8 out of Palace's last 10 games have been both teams to score, so if you like a bet, get on both teams to score. So yeah, I think we'll go Palace to win 2-1. 2-1 Palace. So next up on Wednesday night's fixtures, this is a 7:30. It's Newcastle against Wolves at St James's Park. They're actually entering into a run of fixtures now, Newcastle, where, again, if they want to be a Champions League side, they have to be winning probably all of these. They've got Wolves at home, they've then got Bournemouth at home, they then travel to Southampton, and then they've got Fulham at home. 4 games that you would have to say for a top 4 side, a Champions League contender, you have to win those. That's got to be 12 out of 12. Newcastle have won 8 on the spin, and all of a sudden just looking very much a Champions League side, very much a top 4 side again, and it feels like they've settled in that midfield area with obviously Tonali coming back. He's looked brilliant, and Bruno and Joe Linton in there. Eddie Howe will be hoping that they can take that run of form that they've been on and really carry it into these next few fixtures, because if they can start to pick up those wins, they're only a point behind Chelsea in 4th at the moment, and it really wouldn't surprise me if maybe even by the time they play against Wolves, by full time, they could be ahead of Chelsea. They could be in the top 4 again. And this is a really good opportunity for them to cement that position and to really become strong favourites to be a European side next year. That's exactly where they want to be. That's exactly where they need to be holding on to players like Isak and Gordon and Bruno. These are top players that other clubs absolutely would love. At Liverpool, I would absolutely love all 3 of them at Liverpool. Tremendous players, really, really exciting to watch. For Wolves, I mean, since Pereira's come in, I think he's been like a breath of fresh air. I think he's done really well for Wolves since he's come in and really settled them down. He actually got clean sheets in his first 2 games when he started at Wolves. And then since then, he lost a couple of bodies at the back. I think Craig Dawson got injured and maybe a couple of others. It's all gone a bit higgledy-piggledy since then because they can't stop conceding. However, he's just made his first signing, which a player that probably should start in this one. It's a centre-back from Reims called Agbadou. He's just been brought in for, I think, 16, 17 million quid. 27-year-old defender, quite experienced in League One, and should be able to bring them a bit more authority at the back. They definitely need someone at the back because they've been all over the place all season, even before Pereira came in. I watched Wolves in the Monday Night Football game against Nottingham Forest last week, and I've got to say, I actually thought they played really well. I mean, they lost 3-0 in the end, which I thought the scoreline probably wasn't reflective of the performance, because in the first half, at half-time, Wolves go in 2-0 down. But if they had even a slightly competent striker up front, they'd have had at least 2 in that first half. Missed 2 absolute sitters that I can recall. It might have even been 3. But they had lots and lots of chances, Wolves, in that first half, and didn't put any of them away. And goals change games, right? And Forest hit them on the counter-attack a couple of times, and there you go. They lost. It was never a contest from 2-0. So I think Wolves have to be a lot more clinical in this one. They're not going to get too many chances at St James's Park. It's a tough place to go for any side, especially a side that has had trouble conceding goals and keeping clean sheets. This is not a place you want to be going. So it wouldn't surprise me if Newcastle are ruthless and their relentless self and stick 3, 4, 5 past Wolves. But I don't think that'll be the case. I just suspect we might see a more even contest in this one, because I think Wolves played quite well away to Bristol City in a difficult cup game. I really love watching João Gomez for Wolves at the moment, and Ait Nouri, for as long as he stays at Wolves, is an absolutely fantastic player, cracking player. So I think Wolves will cause Newcastle problems. But I suspect I'm not going to fence it. I think Newcastle get the job done. So I'm going to go for 3-1. I'm going to go Newcastle 3-1. Wolves still going to have trouble keeping clean sheets. It's just inevitable. And but I'll go goals galore again. Let's go both teams to score. Newcastle to win 3-1. Next up, Wednesday, 8 o'clock. It's arguably the game of the game week. It's the North London derby. Arsenal against Tottenham at the Emirates Stadium. Wow. Arsenal can't afford to lose this one, can they? Mikel Arteta has very quickly gone from a manager who just had it all together, and his team were grinding results out, and they were being almost like that machine that we saw City were, and like Arsenal have been for the last couple of years. And very quickly it's just disintegrated. They look a shadow of themselves going forward. It feels like Arsenal only have one way to score, and that's just knocking balls into the box. Just, if you look at the Man United game in the FA Cup this weekend, a lot of the chances came from Odegaard just knocking it in and just dinking little balls into the area. And as good as those crosses may be, it doesn't really vary up their play all that much, so the defence know what to expect. And Harry Maguire and De Ligt, who I thought were terrific, by the way, that was just meat and drink to them. They were just knocking it away all day. And the couple of times it fell to Havertz, and I think Rice obviously had one that went straight at the keeper. Havertz just isn't that clinical striker. He's a very good player. He's a very good player, probably a good second striker, either off the bench or playing slightly deeper behind, a more traditional centre forward, let's say. But Arsenal don't have that. Gabriel Jesus now probably the closest thing to that. It looks like he's out for a long time as well, sadly. So they're in a real bind, Arsenal, and going forward they're going to find it really, really difficult to score goals. Thankfully, Tottenham Hotspur are coming to the stadium though, and they're typically quite generous with goals. I'm only kidding, Spurs fans. I actually think Spurs have been a lot more solid and a lot more sort of resolute at the back since they brought in Kinski. I thought he was great against Liverpool and actually did all right against Tamworth in the Cup. He's got a much better command of his area than Austin or Forster had, and seemingly much better with the ball at his feet as well. That is a really important part of Ange Postecoglou's system that he's not really been able to have, to be able to play out from the back. He's had to change it around, and that's why I've had so much sympathy. If you go back to all of my other videos, I've had so much sympathy with Ange Postecoglou throughout this period where they just seem to be losing games, throwing games away, conceding loads. It feels like Spurs fans have got on top of him quite a bit and, given him lots of grief, and, some have been Ange out and all that sort of thing. I don't think that's the right call at all. I think Postecoglou's a very, very good manager, and he can set a team up really well. He can be a little bit tactically naive at times, especially when Spurs have gone ahead. They've thrown leads away through him continuing to push forward, when sometimes maybe he just needs to calm things down. And this will be a really big test of that. You know, the North London derby at the Emirates, a game that no team ever wants to lose, of course, but I think Arsenal can't afford to lose this one. There's perhaps an argument that Arsenal desperately need to win this one, you know, to really assert their dominance over their North London rivals, who, you know, their fans have probably quite rightly lauded over for the last couple of years and said, you know, you're not doing too well and we're flying, we're on the cusp of winning the title. And now they're just coming down off that hill, aren't they? It's just not quite going so well for Arsenal, and the tide's turning on Arteta. I've seen lots of posts and people talking online about, you know, Arteta out. Is it getting to that point? You know, you'd have to say 6 years and maybe only one trophy, lots and lots of money spent. I can understand why they're critical, because the football is not all that attractive to watch. It's really difficult to watch. You can maybe accept it if it's winning football. When it's not winning football, you don't want to watch that. It's very one-dimensional. It's not what any football fan wants to see, but definitely not Arsenal, who are maybe the purists of the game over the last 25, 30 years, watching Arsenal Wenger, you know, watching teams try to walk it in, you know, great pacey wingers, good on the counter-attack. That's what Arsenal fans are used to, and they don't see a lot of that under Mikel Arteta. It feels very turgid. And again, I don't know what to call here. This might be my most embarrassing set of predictions yet, because I can't remember, have I given one where there's a definite winner? Feels like I've gone draws in most games. But I'm going to have to go a draw again. Both teams to score, draw. I'm going to go 1-1. I'm going to go 1-1. I think Arsenal are too much of a threat off set pieces, that you've got the likes of Gabriel and Saliba coming into the box, and that seems to be the only way that they are going to score. Spurs going forward are such a threat too, especially with Solanke, Kulusevski, Son. These are players that can hurt Arsenal, and I've got to say, I think that Arsenal will struggle to keep them out. I can't see Arsenal not scoring. I can't see Spurs not scoring. And I think the occasion might just get to Mikel Arteta and his men. So I don't think they get the win that they desperately need. And the fan cams on that one should be a very interesting one after the game. On to the Thursday night games. Ipswich against Brighton. It's a 7:30 kickoff. Again, it's a very tough one to call, because I thought Ipswich, when I watched them last week against Fulham, were really in control of the game for large parts. I was surprised. I had Fulham to win that one. I thought defensively they held their shape really well. They pressed really well. They looked like a Premier League outfit for the first time watching them this season. I've got to say, I thought they looked really, really sharp. For long parts of that game, I didn't think Fulham were going to get anything from it until a stupid decision from Sam Morsy to make a tackle on a player who was running away from goal, admittedly in the penalty area, but away from goal. There was no need for him to do what he did. Concedes a penalty, and it's 1-1. And then miraculously, equally miraculously, you know, they go up the other end, they get a penalty. You know, it's like a gift from God. He was smiling on him. Liam Delap steps up, sticks it away, 2-1. And you think, right, now you're in front. Don't mess it up again. For the love of God, you've played really, really well. You deserve these 3 points. They are going to be massive in helping you stay up if you do indeed stay up. Just hang on to it. Just hang on to it now. And then Leif Davis hangs a lazy leg out. Raul Jimenez falls over it, as you'd expect him to. And he sticks it away. It's 2-2. And they've got a point out of a game that maybe before the game, a point wouldn't have been seen as a bad result. But in the context of it, they really should have got the 3. And I was really disappointed for Kieran McKenna, because he'll have been tearing his hair out with that one. And Brighton come to Portman Road in a really weird set of circumstances. I mean, they are 9 games without a Premier League win. 9 games. You have to go back to November for the last time Brighton won a Premier League game. That's astonishing. Especially when you consider that Fabian Herzler won Premier League Manager of the Month. I think it was in August. He started really, really well. And all of a sudden, they've become a very difficult side to beat. I will give them that. They are a very difficult side to beat. But they aren't getting over the line anywhere near as often as they should. They were very good against Arsenal. I actually thought they probably should have won against Arsenal. Once they get that penalty, they probably should kick on and get the winner because they had chances, but they weren't clinical enough in the final third. In the last 9 games, Brighton have drawn 7 and lost 2. So difficult to beat, but again, they're not getting the wins that they need to be. And you just think, a few of them, if they'd have turned them into the wins that they probably should have had, they'd be on the cusp of the European places. They'd be where we have sort of expected Brighton to be in the last few years, where they've rightfully earned their position to be. And you'd have to say they're probably underperforming right now. So I'm going to have to go for a draw again. I'm finding it really difficult to commit either way because Ipswich played so well at Fulham. Brighton played so well against Arsenal. But neither of them are just quite getting the job done. And again, I think a draw probably suits both managers to a degree. Portman Road's a difficult place to go. Brighton will be favourites, quite rightly, going to a newly promoted side. Ipswich have to start winning if they want to drag themselves out of the relegation zone, but more important is that they don't lose this momentum, this rhythm, this confidence that they'll have got from beating Chelsea, going to Fulham and getting a point. In that context, a draw at home to Brighton wouldn't be the worst thing. They'd be 3 unbeaten. They'd be quite happy with that. So I think if McKenna's maybe a bit more pragmatic about things, he might look at it and say, a draw's okay. A draw's not the end of the world. Let's try and, push and go for the win if we can. But if we end up with a draw against Brighton, that's okay. That's no problem. For Brighton, this is where they have to start asking the question about how ambitious do they want to be as a club. I think they're missing something, especially at the back. Defensively, they've looked poor. They've conceded a lot of goals in them games. Those 9 games, they've conceded a lot of goals. And that's been a problem for them. It's been a real problem for them. So they need something extra at the back. They've missed. I know they've had some injuries. They've had players out for large spells, and the defence has been a bit patchwork, hasn't it? Whether it's been Veltman on the side or Lamptey or Hösler's had to move things around to get some sort of an organisation at the back, and it's been difficult when players keep coming in and going back out. But I was just looking at the stats earlier, and whenever Brighton have played teams at the bottom this season, it's been a draw. So that's what I'm going to go for. Again, I feel bad that I'm sitting on the fence. I'll be picking splinters on my backside at this rate. I think with the crowd behind them, Ipswich can get something out of this one, but Brighton they're the better side. They've got too much going forward. So I'm going to go Ipswich Town 1, Brighton 1. Final game of this game week is Thursday's 8 o'clock kickoff. It's Man United against Southampton. High-flying Man United. Can we say that yet? Man United against Southampton at Old Trafford. Again, it all points to a home win, doesn't it? That's amazing what a fortnight can do, isn't it? 2 games against Liverpool and Arsenal, and all of a sudden, the air around Manchester United just feels completely different, doesn't it? All the fans have got the tails up, and it feels like they've maybe turned a corner. Would it be too soon to say that? I think it might be. And the reason I say that is just because Manchester United have, not just under Ruben Amorim, this group of players under Ten Hag and even under Solskjaer before that, the players that were there, they've had a track record for performing when they really need to in the big occasion. Ten Hag's team did it in the FA Cup final against City. They can turn up when they really need to in the big games. It's these games where they struggle. It's this one. This is the litmus test. This is the big test for Amorim. Home against Southampton, where they have to win. They have to win. If they get anything less than a home win in this game, it's a disaster. It is an unmitigated disaster. Make no bones about it. They have to win. When the pressure's off, it's easy enough, isn't it? They went to the Emirates. Everyone was expecting Arsenal to knock them out the cup. Didn't happen. They played very well, admittedly. I thought De Ligt and Maguire were brilliant. I thought Bruno Fernandes was great, and he played like a proper captain for a change. But Bruno Fernandes said it himself. Why can't we play like this every week? That was the frustration against Liverpool, wasn't it? That's what he said in the post-match interview. And this is what will be fascinating about this game against Southampton, because on paper you look at it and think, it's a walkover for United, that one. But actually, this is the games they struggle in. This is the one where we're likely to see a slip-up. This is the one where Southampton could well come and get their first win under Ivan Djuric. Could this be one where they come and upset the apple cart? This is a manager who's built his reputation on good, solid defences. So that's what he was hired to bring to Southampton, and thus far we really haven't seen it. You know, Brentford 5-0. I mean, there have been moments under Ivan Juric, I thought, against West Ham, and even in parts against Crystal Palace, where they looked a lot stronger and the shape at the back looked a lot better. So maybe it's hopier, maybe it's the Liverpool fan in me saying maybe Southampton can get something. You know, in spite of how bad Southampton have been this season, and they have been very, very poor, they have done very well against the bigger teams this season. You know, they lost narrowly at the Etihad, they lost narrowly at the Emirates, they lost very narrowly against Liverpool at St Mary's. They only lost by 1 goal away to Newcastle, and I think away to Villa as well. They've proven they can give the big teams a run for their money when they want to. So I don't know what the odds are at the bookies for Southampton or draw, but might not be the worst idea in the world to have a little look at that. But I do think United get the job done in the end, probably in a similar fashion to what we saw City and Liverpool and Villa and Newcastle do against Southampton. Kind of labour for large parts, and the fans will get frustrated, but United will get it done in the end. They'll nick it, you know, they'll nick 1 or 2. So I'm going to go 2-0. I'm going to go Man United 2, Southampton 0. And that's it. That's my Game Week 21 predictions. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it, as always. If you like this stuff, remember, if you're a football dad like me, if you're a football nerd like me, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe, all the good stuff. Follow me over on TikTok and Twitter and Twitch. All the links are in my bio. And yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.